in process of becoming a dedicated space for Jewish cultural life in Dubai, which is very exciting. We've had some construction going on today, actually, so if you can smell a little bit of that around, that's why. It's fresh, it's happening, and it's exciting. You're seeing it under development. We're sort of in our soft launch phase at the moment, and we've delayed our official launch because of COVID, but soon we're going to have a variety of cultural Jewish programming going on here for the community to enjoy. And we are delighted to be hosting Rabbi Shmuley, who's the second in our monthly speaker event series, and we're just so delighted that you're here. You can follow us on Instagram at amcl.dubai to keep up with our events, and keep an eye out for details of future gatherings and the things that we'll be up to. And without further ado, I'll hand over to Ross, who's going to introduce Rabbi Shmuley.
Thank you. And just to mention, Jake was at Oxford.
Oh, which college?
St. Cat's.
St. Cat's, okay.
A little bit after the L'Chaim Society.
Okay, so at the time that Shmuley ran for Congress in 2012, the Washington Post described him as the most famous rabbi in America, and also as a pop culture icon. But actually, I know him as a friend and rabbi. I met Shmuley in the mid-90s when I came to Oxford. A little bit lonely and displaced, which is how Oxford makes everybody feel. I'd lost my father a few years before, and Debbie and Shmuley became sort of like family to me. And the L'Chaim Society was this amazing hotbed of just crazy mixing of people. There was we had Feldman was there, Cory Booker was president, Dan Williams, Gorbachev came, Netanyahu came, and so many other people. It was such an exciting place to be. And over the years, Shmuley's had so many preoccupations. Israel, obviously Qatar, Iran, conversion, all sorts of issues. But the one that's predominated is relationships. Going back 30 years, I think. That everything, keeping couples together, and talking about the loneliness that all of us face as human beings and how to overcome it. The topic today is called Kosher Sex, the 3 secrets of erotic attraction in marriage. When I told Eddie what the topic was, she said you should put me on the remedial course, which is being offered at 9:15 on Saturday morning at Vineyard on the Farm. That's right. For those of you who have the confidence to come for that. But Shmuley is doing a whole Shabbaton at Vineyard on the Farm with St. Regis. So if you enjoyed tonight, please come to that. I heard you speak last night after 30 years, and I have to say, using your language, you're a freaking good speaker. And I had forgotten actually how amazing you are, and everybody's in for a treat, so huge for
Well, thank you very much, Ross. I appreciate your kind words about me. I feel that, if anything, you understated some virtue.
The sex symbol, international sex symbol,
I think the magazine Sexiest Man Alive, of the decade, of course, not the century or the millennium. Wow, what an experience we've had over the past. This is our 3rd day in Dubai. I did have the honor and the pleasure of serving for 11 years as a rabbi at Oxford University and the personal emissary of the Rabbi. And at the time, the Jewish community had very few, and Chabad in particular, had very few permanent missions programs on campus, and Oxford only had 600 or 700 Jewish students. You had Harvard, Yale, 5,000, 6,000, NYU, 6,000 Jewish undergraduates, and they had no Chabad rabbis. So why Oxford? Because the Rebbe believed that so many of those students would go on to impact the world. They'd be a sponge that would absorb whatever we were offering, and they would offer it to a wider community. And at the time, over the past few years, many of our students have, thank God, distinguished themselves in public service. Senator Cory Booker, where I live in New Jersey, was my student president in 92 to 94. Ambassador Ron Dermer, who was ambassador until January 20th of last year for many years, and was actually instrumental in the Abraham Accords, was our student president as well. Mayor Eric Garcetti, Mayor of Los Angeles, who's about to become American ambassador to India. I could go on. But really, what Ross has achieved, as one of our former students who was such a regular at the time study, and really was part of our family, it's mind-boggling. Until you come here and see it on the ground, I know that all of you experience this on a daily basis, that a Jewish community can thrive and flourish in the United Arab Emirates with a government that is so respectful and friendly and welcoming, and with a population that we've experienced to be the same. This is just miraculous. I think the progress of the past 2 years has been so electrifying that you almost forget until you come here on the ground to understand it. And this was always my dream. More than anything, I believe in what the Torah says in the very first chapter of Genesis. Before we talk about almost anything else, God creates the world and He says that humanity is the crown jewel of creation, that every human being is created in the image of God. Every human being. Jew, Muslim, agnostic, atheist, Catholic, Buddhist, Hindu, Jain, everything in between. But that was a very difficult vision to realize because of all the conflicts, especially between Arabs and Jews and Muslims, where really Jews had lived in Arab lands for more than a millennium. And to see this new awakening of brotherhood and the fact that it's germinating, specifically here in the UAE, it becomes a model for the whole world. It becomes just the art of the possible. The possibilities are just they're wondrous, and I really am excited about it. To walk around with a yarmulke and tzitzis as we have for 3 days, and to be shown nothing but respect, is something that it's a gospel I'm preaching to all my social media followers, and many of them are watching right now. And I plan to write about it, and because this is the way the world's supposed to be. This is the way God intended it. This is what religion is supposed to do, not divide, but connect. So, having said all that, it's interesting that the first speech that Ross has asked me to give to the Jewish community here in Dubai, and it is such a pleasure to be a part of AMCL, and I asked if the Abraham part was specifically after the Abraham Accords, and it was, correct?
Yeah, I mean, you would know more about the background than me, but AMCL, I think that name was pre-existing, or? Yeah,
pre-existing.
Yeah.
Okay. And Abraham was also pre-existing. So it all works out. But it's fascinating to me that Ross has asked me specifically to speak about relationships, kosher sex, kosher lust. But why not? Because it's all about connecting people. I'm a great believer that the way we connect people macrocosmically in the world at large, communities, nations, ethnicities, nationalities, is by first connecting them intimately, through marriage, through family, through loving relationships. Love is the glue that pulls the universe together, and hatred is the dark matter that pushes everyone apart. In the Middle East, we've had way too much of the latter. It's time to have a lot more of the former. So why not? First speech should be make love, not war. And so when I served as rabbi at Oxford University all those years ago, I expected to teach Torah, I expected to teach God, I expected to teach ethics and values. I didn't expect to teach relationships. It really became, it was the outgrowth of the kind of loneliness that you described. Oxford can be a very isolating university. It's very competitive. Even the whole nature of the university is quite interesting. Unlike some of America's Ivy League universities, Oxford is actually comprised of about 35 separate and autonomous colleges, which together, under the umbrella of Oxford University, become one university. But it's really all these different colleges. And there were so many students who were in broken relationships, and they wanted to talk to me about relationships. So I started writing like a weekly essay giving people advice about relationships based on a lot of the conversations that I was having with the students. Soon enough, the Sunday Times came down to write a story about this rabbi who was giving relationship advice. Well, that got Macmillan, publisher in the UK, to ask me if I would actually write a book. I published A Jewish Guide to Adultery. One word, don't. And that led to another book called Kosher Sex, which unexpectedly became an international bestseller, thank God. I should say that I couldn't even get a publisher for kosher sex. The idea of kosher sex was sex as intimacy. We have sex is seen in one of two ways. It's either for procreation, which is probably the only area of agreement between the Catholic Church and evolutionary biology. In the Catholic Church, sex really is mostly about procreation, but the same thing is true in evolutionary biology. The propagation of the gene pool. So you have this area of unexpected agreement between Catholicism and between a lot of agnostic or atheistic biology, the kind taught by people like Richard Dawkins, the world's most famous atheist, who I debated many times on this at Oxford. So sex is either procreational or it's recreational. Sex is for pleasure. The problem with both is that they really don't work. Are we really going to say that the whole purpose of sex is just to produce babies? That would mean that men and women are nothing but a means to an end. And science may see us that way, but that's not how the Bible sees us. The Bible sees us as an end in and of ourselves. As I just said, humanity is the crown jewel of creation. Neither is it only recreational, because sex, which is only kind of fun, but doesn't end up making you feel connected, can be an extremely empty experience. Now, I know that Woody Allen once said that is sex...
The empty experience is good.
Yeah, the empty experiences is one of the best. Yeah, anyway. But Woody Allen is not in favor anymore, so even quoting him could be a little bit controversial. I believe that the most profound comment ever made about sex is in the beginning of the book of Genesis, chapter 2, verse 24, and it says this: "Therefore shall a man leave his father and leave his mother. He shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall become one flesh." But the purpose of sex is not procreational. Judaism rejects that. It's not just recreational, because it's a much more profound and intimate human experience, but rather the purpose of sex is intimacy. Sex is a motion which calls forth emotions. Sex is something that's supposed to be transformative. It's supposed to make us feel connected. And I have to tell you that the very first problem described in the Bible, and I alluded to this last night at the launch of that minyan. What an honor to be a part of it at Gil's restaurant. The very first problem described in the Bible is a problem of human loneliness. God says about Adam, just before he created Eve from one of his ribs, "Lo tov heyot ha'adam levado." It is not good for humanity to be alone. The kind of isolation and the kind of loneliness that we have seen grip the world through the coronavirus pandemics reminds us that humanity's foremost challenge remains that of loneliness. The idea that a British Prime Minister who won an overwhelming election victory just a few years ago, very recently, and may be brought down because he had a party. I mean, just think about that for a moment. People are finding all these different ways to connect during the coronavirus, some legitimate, some less so. The idea that a giant scandal is going on in the world's oldest parliamentary democracy, that a government may be brought down because people kind of felt they had to connect, but they were telling the rest of the country you cannot. That's fascinating, because we have felt the weight of loneliness through the coronavirus. And by the way, they've been necessary. The lockdowns are there to, in the United States we were saying, let's be apart now so we can get together later. But it just shows you how badly we want to connect. But what happens? God willing, the coronavirus will be banished from the earth. God promised that plagues and pestilence will be banished from the earth. But we will still have this problem of human loneliness. What happens when two human beings interact? They're spouses, they love each other, and they have the closest physical interaction, creating friction between their actual bodies, and kissing, exchanging life breaths. My God, we didn't understand the power of the human kiss. And God breathed into Adam the breath of life. We didn't understand the power of life breaths until the coronavirus, where breath, which is so life-affirming, became something that was a mortal danger. But what happens when a man and a woman can kiss and exchange life breaths, can have their bodies and their limbs intertwined, and can even, as we often do in kosher sex, open their eyes and peer deeply into each other during an intimate interaction, but still feel lonely the morning after? If even lovemaking isn't going to make you feel connected, then what will? Loneliness is the greatest challenge to human existence. And it cannot simply be alleviated by binge watching Netflix. There's only so many, I've run out of Netflix shows to watch during the pandemic. I did Bridgerton, and I did, what's the one from Korea where everybody kills each other? Squid Games, and I did, in the United States, it's fascinating. We've got like 10, I don't know if you have them all here in Dubai, we've got like 10 massive streaming services. We've got Peacock and Paramount Plus, and we've got Netflix, and we've got Prime, and we got Hulu. Oh my God, do you have all of them here? You guys don't know what you're missing. And with all of that, how much can you distract people from the existential pangs of loneliness because you're supposed to feel connected to another human being, that you don't need foreign Hollywood dialogue constantly invading your space so that you don't think about how lonely you are? By the way, this is a true story. Just before the coronavirus lockdowns, my wife is Australian. I was a rabbinical student in Australia, very close to our in-laws, so we haven't been able to see my in-laws now for 2 years. They live in Sydney, and Australia has experienced extremely severe lockdowns. And just before the coronavirus pandemic, we were visiting my wife's parents, and I was doing a lecture tour for a new book that I published for Pamela Anderson called Lust for Love. And she and I are co-authors of the book. And I went to New Zealand to do media there as well. And you can't make this up. I'm on this TV show, and I'm saying, look, Netflix is really beginning to invade our sex lives. It's really beginning to distort our erotic connection. People would much rather, kind of watch these binge things together as husband and wife than make love, because sex has now been reduced in the American marriage a week for 7 minutes time the husband spends begging. Okay, at least somebody laughed at that.
It's very American joke. So
I know. I apologize. I'm way too American. Listen, we can't compete with Dubai men. You can't expect us American men. You guys are like Superman. So I'm on this show in New Zealand and saying that Netflix is ruining our sex life, and this guy starts arguing with me, the host of the show, and it's becoming contentious. And I'm saying to him, look, I have the statistics I can show you. Once a week, 7 minutes at a time. He said, I'm not arguing with that. I said, of course. He said, my argument is, there's nothing wrong with that. Netflix is so much better than sex anyway. It's funny, a newspaper later wrote it up. No one believed me that he said that. But I think a lot of people might even agree. So, why was this subject so important to me? Human intimacy and human interactions that assuage loneliness, that are passionate, that are intimate, that are erotic. Because I'm a child of divorce. And we have yet to discover the secret to keeping a man and a woman happily under the same roof for the duration of their lives, where they're not staying together because of a mortgage, or because of the guilt of children, or because divorce is too expensive, which is one of the reasons a lot of people stay together. Maybe only 25% of marriages are happy. There's a 50% divorce in the United States. In fact, in the United States since 1980, about 63% of all marriages have ended in divorce. And then, of the, say, 50% or whatever it is, 40% that remain together, how many are happy? And I started asking myself, I didn't like my parents divorcing. It caused me a lot of pain. I didn't grow up around my father. That's why I'm so close to my siblings. In fact, if you don't mind, my brother, who I'm very close to, is in the hospital right now, and he went in for something routine and it became an infection and it got more serious. So if you don't mind, I'm going to say a little prayer for him, because I feel that in a place like Dubai, God listens. In a place where God sees such brotherhood, I feel that God listens. So I'm going to say a little song, take a moment. Well, this is Psalm 20 from the book of Psalms. God will listen to you on the day that you cry out. He'll send his salvation from on high. He'll remember all the good things you do for the people that you love. We come with our doctors, we come with science, we thank God for all the miracles of modern science, but we remember ultimately that God provides healing. And God will answer us on the day we cry out. Okay, thank you very much, because he's much on my mind. I wanted to figure out the secret to keeping husband and wife together, and the secret of intimate connection. And I am going to share with you tonight the 3 secrets of erotic attraction. And we're going to answer a question tonight that no one has ever answered in all of world history. We're going to make history right here tonight in Dubai. But before I give you the 3 secrets of attraction and I answer a question that's never been answered before, I first have to establish my qualifications. Why should all of you living out here in Dubai, 8,000 miles away from where I live, in the New York, New Jersey area, listen to a rabbi with a yarmulke and a beard and 9 children, thank God, and 9 grandchildren? I want to welcome my son-in-law, Rabbi Moshe Gidler, who runs the yeshiva in Yerushalayim, who came to visit us here. My daughter Shana, our granddaughter, little baby Chaya Rasha, my son Yosef, who lives in Israel as well, and our daughter Chetzki, who's our youngest, 7 to 9. Why would you listen to a rabbi talk about sex? In fact, what do rabbis know about sex? Everyone knows that Orthodox Jews all have sex through a sheet with a hole in the middle, right? Right? Who here has heard that Orthodox Jews have sex through a sheet with a hole in the middle? Okay. Even the Wall Street Journal heard that. Okay. So just tell me, you've heard that Orthodox Jews have sex with a hole in the middle.
Yeah.
You do know there's no truth to that. Because
I don't know, is the answer, yeah.
Because only Reformed Jews do that. Because we Orthodox have sex in 2 separate bedrooms through a hole in the wall. The hole in the sheet is way too lenient. That's an extremely lenient position. And the ultra Orthodox have sex in full body armor.
Sounds kinky, actually. Yeah.
Okay, that's one misconception. No, I will dispel that myth. But when I first I was telling you, when I wanted to publish Kosher Sex, I'm establishing my qualifications here. When I was writing Kosher Sex, there was a British publisher, very well-known publisher called Duckworth, and they had done a series called An Intelligent Person's Guide to X, or An Intelligent Person's Guide to Philosophy, Intelligent Person's Guide to Atheism, Intelligent Person's Guide to Science. And they asked me to write An Intelligent Person's Guide to Judaism. The publisher would later become a very good friend, Robin Barrett Smith. So I said to him, well, I'm only going to publish the book if you agree. I have another book in manuscript called Kosher Sex. He agreed to do it. Supposed to sell a few thousand copies. It became an international best-selling book, translated into 17 languages. And I started touring all around the world to talk about this book. And we got. So for those of you who wonder what my qualifications are, you should see the approbations we got for the book. At the time, Pope John Paul II put out a famous line, a little blurb for the book. It was in Latin. It said, "No chuppah, no shtuppah." No one got that. Okay. At least Ross got that. Okay. And Bill Clinton was president at the time. Bill Clinton actually wrote me a letter about the book. My kid's sitting in my office right there. And he wrote, "For some, Kosher Sex is just a book. For me, it's a way of life." He didn't write that, but he did write me a letter. And for those of you who heard that the book was very controversial and that the rabbinate found it to be kind of unbecoming for a rabbi to write a book about sex, there's no truth to that. In fact, my rabbinical colleagues were so enamored and so excited about the book that they all pulled their resources together and sent me and they're continuing to send me on a very important book launch, book tour to promote the book. And I'm excited to tell you tonight that I will soon be visiting to promote the book, Tehran, Shiraz. Wearing a Mugga David t-shirt, it's going to be amazing. Okay, humor aside, what is the nature of human attraction? How do we sustain attraction? Do we even still believe that a man and a woman can remain attracted to another in a long-term relationship? Is monogamy viable? That was the question I had asked myself as a child of divorce. And by the way, you've all heard that monogamy scientifically doesn't seem to be that viable. First of all, when marriages worked, we all heard, that's because people, died of a single germ at 35 years old. The idea that we live, thank God, today into our 80s or 90s and we're expected to be married for 50 or 60 years is just utterly uncommon. If you go to places like Scandinavia, if you go to Iceland, if you go to Denmark, if you go to Finland, Scandinavia especially, marriage is dying as an institution. It doesn't mean they don't believe in love. They do. They just believe in serial monogamy. So serial monogamy, if you go to Iceland, for example, speak to the couples, they'll tell you, we know that love lasts 4 to 8 years. So we don't expect it to last longer. Therefore, there's no heartbreak. The marriage, or if they marry at all, the relationship goes through a natural process where after 4 to 8 years it begins to decline, and then we move on to the next relationship. We make sure that we're close about the children, and there's no fighting. Divorce only becomes something disappointing if you expected monogamy to be lifelong, to death do us part. But it was never a realistic expectation. That's what a lot of people today believe. It leads to deep cynicism about marriage. That's why a lot of people sow their wild oats during their 20s and they settle down in their early 30s to marry. They don't expect to have passion and excitement in their 20s. They don't expect to have passion and excitement in marriage. They expect to have it in their 20s, when they can play the field, when they can find excitement through novelty, new bodies, new flesh. They don't expect to find new dimensions of the same relationship, to remain interested in the same monogamous partner. But I'm here to tell you tonight that that's not the case. And I said I'm going to tell you 3 stages of attraction, but I would first answer one question that has never been answered before. And what is that question? In 1938, when he was fleeing from the Nazis, and tomorrow is International Holocaust Remembrance Day, I still remember 2 years ago, just before the pandemic, I was at Auschwitz for the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz by the Red Army on January 27th, 1945. And then I got back from Poland and suddenly the pandemic hit. In 1938, when he was fleeing from the Nazis as the most famous Jew in all of Austria after the Anschluss, Sigmund Freud got a letter from Marie Bonaparte, who was one of his students, and she was the great niece of Napoleon. And she asked him a simple question that no one has ever answered until tonight. She said to him, famous question, what is it that a woman wants? What is it that a woman wants? Now Freud, till today, is the scourge of feminists everywhere, because Freud essentially denied women an intrinsic identity. For Freud, a woman was a castrated male. When a woman married her husband on the wedding night, Freud believed that she had a subconscious desire to castrate him to almost absorb his masculine qualities. You can't make this stuff up, right? So he essentially, the man who delved so deeply into the human psyche and taught us about the id and the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, the ego, superego, he couldn't answer the simple question of what is it a woman wants. We're going to answer that tonight, right now. Help me answer it. What is it that a woman wants?
Diamonds.
That was the answer. That was easy. Well, you know what? A lot of people believe that. A lot of people believe that women want financial security, and they'll marry a guy who can provide it. And a lot of men do believe that. Which is why the first question a woman asks a guy at some singles event or a mixer is, what do you do? Right. And when he says, I'm a part-time night watchman at a local junkyard, he says, oh, I said, I'm a lesbian, sorry. I didn't get you, What is it that a woman wants? Help me here. What does a woman want?
Love, companionship.
Love. Love. Isn't that the simple answer? Why am I even asking? Why didn't Freud say that? A woman wants to be loved. Because if a woman wants to be loved, the stupidest thing to do is to shack up, marry a total stranger. If you want to be loved, no one is ever going to love you more unconditionally and more predictably and more strongly than your parents. If you marry a man, he may cheat on you. When's the last time your parents cheated on you? When's the last time your parents took your Hanukkah present and gave it to the next door neighbor girls down, next door, middle of the night? Penelope, you're the daughter we really wanted to have. One day we'll be able to celebrate our love for you as our daughter openly, but for now, it'll have to be a secret. Or how many parents divorce their children? How many parents sit down, Penelope, we've tried, it just hasn't worked out between us. So we're going to move into one domicile, you're going to get your own apartment. If you want to be loved, no one's going to love you more than your parents. So why do women, at the age of 13, 14 already, why do they begin to feel that the omnipotence of their parents' love has become something utterly impotent? It can't even make them feel validated, and they have to now be guilted or threatened to stay home and not want off to see their boyfriends. What are they looking for? Help me here. What does one want?
So the answer was not that.
If it's love, they'll stay home, right?
Happiness.
Happiness. Oh my God. And you believe marriage brings happiness? Now here's a romantic.
No, because we're only on our first year.
That's right, okay. We'll give you a couple of months. What does a woman want? I believe this. I believe, I often hear, well, a woman wants to be loved, cherished, she wants to be admired, complimented, protected, appreciated, cherished. There's only one thing your parents cannot give you, even if they love you. What can't they give you? Your parents can love you, but they cannot choose you. And a woman wants to be chosen. God does not call the Jewish people my beloved people. He doesn't call Jewish people my unique people, my cherished people. He calls them the chosen people. What does it mean to be chosen? When your mother tells you you're the prettiest girl in the whole class, you're the smartest in the whole class, you don't believe her. You roll your eyes because you know that she has a genetic shotgun pointed to her head making her say it. But when a stranger tells you, I am more drawn to you than anyone else and chooses you, you get that one thing that everyone seeks in life, which is to feel chosen, special, distinguished, unique. That's why marriage has to take place in public, in front of the whole community and all your friends. I mean, at first glance, it would be the stupidest thing to do in public. This is the most intimate commitment you're ever making. What is Cousin Ralph doing there? What is Uncle Irving doing there? Because to be chosen, you have to simultaneously deselect everyone else. You need to make a public proclamation that I am taking myself off the market, as is she, as we devote ourselves exclusively to one another. See, even your parents can have other children. You can have siblings, but not in marriage. We all want to be chosen. And chosenness is all based on one foundational concept called desire. We want to be desired. Desire leads to someone being drawn to us, gravitating toward us, and we're chosen. You know why I say all this? Because I'm going to introduce a very revolutionary concept to you right now. I do not believe in marriages that are based on love. I don't think love is a strong enough bond to keep people under the same roof for 50 or 60 years, and it's why the divorce rate is so high. You know why marriage has failed? It's not because divorce is strong, it's because marriage is just too weak. Marriage has failed because love is not a strong enough bond to keep people under the same roof for 50 or 60 years happily and passionately. But you know what is strong enough? Not love, but lust, desire. The Jewish marriage was never based on love. It was based on teshukah, lust. What is the 10th commandment? God doesn't say don't love another man's wife. It was last week's Torah reading, Parshas Yisro. It says, Lo tachmod. What does tachmod mean? Do not covet another man's wife. Lust and desire are always supposed to be the foundation of a male-female passionate romantic relationship, and we forgot that. We've turned marriage from something based on desire into something based on friendship. What does a woman say? This is my husband. He's my best friend. And I'm thinking, God, help that. Oh my God, are you serious? Best friend? What do you guys like drink beer together and like have a Heineken? You guys watch the NFL playoffs and the Super Bowl? And I know I'm in Dubai, I really should say soccer, you guys call that football. But believe it or not, on the Erotic flight on the way here on Emirates, they actually had the 2 playoff games of the NFL on the plane. And I said, God bless the Erotic. I couldn't believe it. Because I was expecting to see the Premier League. You know, we Americans kind of laugh at soccer a little bit because we're a very goal-oriented country. Americans get bored very quickly. We cannot have a 90-minute match that ends 0-0 and call it exciting. It's never going to happen. We're not going to have a match like, the World Cup ends 1-0. It's never going to happen. And I lived in England for 11 years, and I tried so hard to get into soccer. I promise you. I tried everything, it just didn't work. But you give me one touchdown pass, man. Oh yeah, okay. How did I get diverted into football and soccer? God. The Jewish marriage, sorry?
Friendship. That's a big you.
Friends, exactly. That's right. Thank you very much. Oh my God.
You don't watch football.
That was a test. You don't want to pass it. My own wife is rolling her eyes, thinking, I don't know what the heck he's talking about. Like I'm already embarrassed, and I don't even know who he is. We're not related. I mean, desire and lust is the most powerful force in any human interaction, and it's incredible to me that we have so marginalized it, even demonized it. Lust has become an ugly word. Lust is something for internet porn. It's not something for America. Let me prove how powerful lust is. I counsel so many couples who really love each other, but one of the partners has been unfaithful. And you sit there as you try to reconcile the relationship, and only statistically, actually it's quite interesting. If a husband's unfaithful, the marriage survives 75% of the time. If the wife is unfaithful, it survives only 25% of the time. And one of the main reasons is that women don't just cheat, they actually have affairs, they have relationships. There's much more of an emotional connection. But be that as it may, I'll save that for another time. As I try to save these marriages where there's been an act of infidelity, you know what the husband or wife will always say? It meant nothing to me. I didn't love her. I lusted after her. But do you realize what you're saying? This is the mother of your children. You admit that you love her for 20 years, but lust was so much more powerful that it completely undermined the relationships that you couldn't even remember who you were married to. And then I say to myself, well, why don't we use lust in relationships more? And the main answer, why don't we? Why do we say love is, we wax so lyrical and poetic about love, and we see lust as almost a form of human corruption. And the main reason? Because we don't think that lust can be sustained. We don't think desire can be sustained. We feel that love can, because love is a low simmering kind of emotion, but lust is too passionate, burns too brightly. And that's why we start saying, this is my spouse, he or she is my best friend. And we've now made friendship and partnership the mainstay of relationships when it's just not strong enough to keep you happy under the same roof. The mortgage may be stronger, the kids may be stronger, the job may be stronger, social standing may be stronger, the attorney fees for a divorce lawyer may be stronger. That's how we're supposed to be held together from the outside. You know the way the great cathedrals of Europe are all held up, like Notre Dame, which almost burned down, and hope God willing it'll reopen. And they're held up by something called flying buttresses. The architecture is such that these are things that soar to the sky. They have to be held up by the outside, flying buttresses. That's what most marriages are like today. They're held up by something external. It's not an internal desire to be someone. It's not chosenness. It's rather almost a form of coercion. And we wonder why people are so cynical about marriage.
Should we ask you a question?
Sure.
Love seems to be more of a unique thing than lust, right?
But why? I know we make that assumption, but why? Yeah.
It's possible for a man to look at a beautiful woman and feel desire for her, even if she's not married to him, right?
Correct.
Whereas it's hard to imagine that you would love somebody that you're not married to. That would be seen like more of a violation, so to speak, or more of an unlikely occurrence, so to speak. But I mean, men are men, right? I mean, men.
That's one of the reasons.
Unless you're sort of forcing yourself not to do that. Just it's in the nature of the, it's an occupational hazard.
That's why, before I introduce three concepts, and I know that time's passing by, before I introduce three concepts of desire, the first thing I wanted to do is, the hardest thing is to get men to believe in this. That's why first I wanted the men to hear what women want.
So how is kind of uniqueness to lust?
I want to just give you an example of what I mean. If a husband were to go to his wife and say, look, I love you very deeply, but I don't desire you. What would that make the woman feel like? Would she feel, oh, but at least you love me. You don't want to touch me, you don't want to make love to me, you don't stare at me when I undress at night. By the way, 70% of American housewives undress in the bathroom, even though, in front of their husbands. And the main reason? The insult that he doesn't look. He's staring at the TV. It's just an insult. The body is supposed to be magnetic. There is no bigger insult you could say to a woman that you love, that, look, I love you, but I just don't desire you anymore. That is the essence of divorce. Most divorces are becoming much more amicable. People aren't really fighting. They're just drifting apart through a loss of desire. And they'll tell you that even after they marry, look at in Hollywood, they'll always say, every Hollywood publicist puts out the same statement about a celebrity divorce. They will always love each other. It's always the same thing. They get along. So why are you divorcing? That's why I'm first establishing that a woman doesn't want only to be loved, she wants to be chosen. I don't think that we men have any real understanding of female, the female heart. One of the things that we saw in the Me Too movement was not just the violations, but the cluelessness, the cluelessness. It's time to be better educated about respectful women, understanding women, and what we're all seeking in a relationship. You may be right that men can naturally feel lust toward other women, but a wife wants to feel a girlfriend, someone in a primary relationship. I'm not only speaking to people who are married, I don't only deal with religious people, and certainly don't only deal with Jewish people. We're talking about what it is that we all want. We want to feel there's something magnetic about us, something that just draws people to us. There's an inner charisma to us. And it doesn't have to be... Sorry.
So when you speak about chosenness, which is an amazing idea, you mean choosing to desire one unique person. Is that what it means? What are you choosing?
It means an electric gravitation towards someone that makes them feel special, unique, and distinguished at all times. In marriage is being like a celebrity to one. Without going too deeply into it, I was Michael Jackson's rabbi, and he and I wrote this book, Michael Jackson Takes Based on 30 Hours of Conversation. But what we focused on was the nature of celebrity. Michael was kind of deprived, as he speaks openly in the book, about attention, his father's affection, which he yearned for his entire life and tried to kind of earn it. But later in life, he would earn the love of, he thought, of tens of millions of people, maybe hundreds of millions of people. But I always said to him, none of that will ever compensate for the love in a primary relationship where someone loves you unconditionally, not because you thrill them with your art, but because of some intrinsic, deep connection. That's what I mean by lust. Lust is a yearning. There's no good translation for teshukah in English, the way it is in Hebrew. This yearning of the soul, like we say in Deep Nefesh, at the beginning every Friday night when we start the Sabbath prayers. Ki ze kama nichsof nichsafti. Oh my God, how my soul has pined and yearned for you. Hebrew has such elaborate language about this deep yearning that lust doesn't quite capture, especially if it's the corruption of the word. But given that time is marching on, having established that we all want to be desired, I just want to quickly affirm, what are the three ingredients? If I'm right, that we gave up on being lovers to instead become partners, that if we gave up on being soulmates to instead become best friends, if I'm correct, that the reason we gave up the intensity of relationships to have this, what does the word partnership even mean? It has a commercial connotation. If we gave this all up simply because it wasn't going to last, then how can we make it last? So, there are 3 rules of desire. They're very simple, and yet very profound. The first rule of desire is what we call, and what I want to demonstrate, again, is how we're doing everything wrong today, moving away from these 3 principles, and then you'll begin to understand why our relationships are unraveling, and why we don't feel that sense of chosenness. And by the way, if you don't feel chosen in your primary relationship, then you're only going to feel chosen at work, in your career. You're going to try to impress the boss, you're going to become a workaholic, you're going to define yourself by how many zeros are in your bank account. You will be distinguished not by your heart, but by your hands. Not by feelings and emotions, but by productive capacity, which is destroying a generation of men. There are so many lonely men. That's why we're seeing astonishing rates of alcoholism, especially among men, but it's even increasing among women, because men are not feeling chosen. They're only feeling chosen based on what they produce, based on the prefixes before their name, the suffixes after their name, the kind of university they went to, etc., etc. All externalities that will define who they are. So here's the 3 rules. Number 1, the first rule of lust and desire and erotic attraction is unavailability. We all pine for that which we cannot have. Now that might sound very straightforward, but relationship experts give it a different name. We call it the erotic obstacle. There always has to be something that is an obstacle to your lust. There has to be something that blocks you from getting what you want. I'll give you an example. Why is it that all fast food sucks? Now, as an Orthodox Jew, I am not regularly in the habit of eating at McDonald's, unless I'm in Israel. And the funny thing is, whenever we take our kids to Israel, the first thing, before the Kotel, before the Tel Aviv beach, they want to go to McDonald's. You know, because the whole year you live, you can't go. You go to Israel, and then you immediately discover you're eating like the chicken McNuggets. It's glue. You know, by the way, McDonald's is definitely going to sue me now. I'm sorry, I apologize. Don't sue me. I have 9 children. Have some off mine, okay? But you know, you can't wait for chicken McNuggets, and it tastes like one of your kids took Elmer's and shoved it in the and the hamburger. There's nothing to it. But my kids always want it. Why is all fast food bad? Some of it has to be good. Why do we wait to go to these expensive restaurants where maybe the quality isn't even that much better? You're paying 10 times the amount. Answer: because it's fast food. Because you don't wait for it. Because you don't wait for it, your glands don't salivate to eat the food. There has to be an impediment. When you go to a fancy restaurant and the first thing that the waiter tells you is the specials of the day, you know what the specials of the day? It's fast food. The specials of the day are stuff they cooked in the morning that they're going to make a much bigger profit on because it was all made in mass. But even when you order it, you're going to wait 15 minutes for it. Because they know if you get it instantly, it's going to taste awful. Not because of the food, but because it's too immediate. The first rule of attraction is actually unavailability. Another little Michael Jackson story that we have to deal. I was once with Michael Jackson in his hotel suite in New York, early 2000s, and at the time Britney Spears was the biggest star in the entire world. And she had come to see him. Anyway, it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and suddenly she was on TV. On one of those, you know, Hollywood shows, Access Hollywood or whatever it was. Extra, one of those. I remember Michael turning to me and saying to me, her fame may not last. I said, why? He said, no star would ever put themselves on a 4 o'clock TV show. He said, Shmuley, I don't even present awards at the, at the Oscars or at the Grammys. He had this great belief in mystery. He may have taken it too far, by the way. Everything in moderation. Unavailable. So if you look at all the giant stars whose longevity in movies has lasted, they almost never give interviews. You're talking, try to find an interview with Leonardo DiCaprio and how rare that is. Or Meryl Streep. Or Tom Cruise. I think the last time was when he was jumping up and down. I mentioned Tom Cruise because I know he's very associated with Burj Khalifa. But then you have the other stars. Every second, they're absolutely everywhere. And they get immediate attention. They'll get a lot of likes on Instagram. But try getting someone to pay $20 to see them in a movie. Not going to happen. Unavailability creates attraction. They say that the biggest star of the 20th century, female, it was, of all people, Greta Garbo, who always made sure that she only did movies in like dark lighting. And look at all the people we're obsessed with. All these stars who died so young. It was specifically, if the Beatles had not broken up after 10 years, I don't know if they'd be as big today. Maybe they would. They were immensely talented. We're still seeing documentaries about the Beatles, one that just aired on Disney, about their incredible, the last concert they did on the top of Apple Records in 69, 70. Marilyn Monroe has this giant series on CNN, dies at what, 34 years old, approximately, 36 years old. That's the tragic side of it. We don't want it to be tragic, but the first rule of attraction is unavailability. Isn't that the exact opposite of what we believe today? That men and women are supposed to create constant availability? That everything about you is supposed to be disclosed? That everything about you is supposed to be all over social media? Everything about your body is supposed to be immediately exposed? Modesty has died as a concept. I'm not speaking as a religious concept. I'm speaking about modesty as an erotic concept. And that's why Judaism even in marriage, makes a wife and a husband unavailable to each other sexually, even in marriage, for 12 days out of every month. It's a fascinating concept because the essence of marriage is sex on tap. It's totally available. Sex on tap never works. And that's the biggest complaint that women have, that there's no foreplay. A lot of guys think that foreplay is almost like something you do during golf, or, you know. No, that didn't come out right. I was going to say four. Judaism makes things unavailable. It's just fascinating. It makes going to the synagogue. There's a separation between men and women. And I'm not speaking about women and second-class citizens, that we would reject that. I'm talking about a mechitza straight down the middle. There's still a barrier to men and women, so that, because eroticism is actually magnified, not lessened through erotic obstacles. It's a fascinating idea. That's rule number one. What's rule number two of attraction? If the first is unavailable, what's the second? So rule number two is what we call mysteriousness. Mystery is the soul of attraction. If you go into a synagogue, if you go into a church, you will see an image of Jesus, the founder of Christianity, especially if it's a Catholic church, in the sign of in the posture of crucifixion. It's a very powerful image, very painful image, and it's right there glaring in front of you. The most important image, the most sacred image of the religion. Interestingly, if you go to a mosque and you go to a synagogue, you will see no such thing. They're both based on this idea of complete mystery. You don't even see the main image. The main image in a synagogue is the Torah scroll. Do you know what it takes to see a Torah scroll in the shul? You have to open the curtain. You have to then open the ark. You then have to open the gates of the ark. You then have to take off the mantle of the Torah. You then have to take off the tie of the Torah, the gartel of the Torah, and only then will you actually see the words of the Torah. And you know the impression it has therefore? That whenever a Torah comes out, there's a sense of awe and reverence. Everyone stands up. Even Jews who are not that traditional, who are more secular, there's a sense of reverence to the Torah, this mysteriousness, all these barriers until you actually experience the awe. Why do you think, and by the way, Gothic architecture, the reason why these great cathedrals I mentioned before are built like that, it's all about shadow, it's all about mystery. They're never fully and completely illuminated. In Christianity, you speak about the mysterium tremendum, the great mysteries of the faith. That's why in every healthy relationship there are 4 stages. As the mystery slowly becomes, as the riddle, the enigma slowly becomes more prescient, more revealed, more tangible, more experiential. Stage number 1 in any healthy relationship is attraction. You're drawn to someone mysteriously. Man and woman see each other, even like tonight, and who is that? You find a reason to talk. It might be a pickup line. Your body is a temple. And she says, thank you, but there are no services today. That's a real bad hole. But stage number 1 is attraction. You're drawn to someone mysteriously. I don't just mean physical attraction. See, lust is not just a physical thing. Lust is as I said, the electric gravitation of the masculine and feminine energy. Something recognized in Hinduism as Jivan Mukta, of Shiva and Shakti, something recognized in Kabbalah as Za and Nukva, the idea of the masculine and feminine. So the first is just attraction. So stage number 2, verbal exploration. You start to speak, you start to explore who this person is, you find out more about them. Slowly the enigma is more revealed, but slowly. Stage number 3 is what we call emotional intimacy. You begin to share secrets, you begin to share confessionals that are exclusive to this person. And then stage number 4 is finally physical intimacy. That's a healthy relationship. Attraction, verbal exploration, emotional intimacy, and finally, physical intimacy. Look at how that's the exact opposite of today's relationships. Attraction leads to physical intimacy. 1 out of 3 American couples has sex on the first date. That kind of revelation leaves no mystery, and then we wonder why relationships are undermined from the beginning. And by the way, it's a very interesting thing. I've counseled thousands of singles, couples. Do you know how men, if you're a woman, you're dating a guy, you know how you know when he's interested, and you're really interested. I mean, as a lifelong partner as opposed to just a date. It's when he won't have sex with you so quickly. And a lot of women see this guy go, that means he's not attracted to me. Precisely the opposite. They're actually enjoying the slow unraveling, the mysteriousness. Relationships that are too revelatory actually undermine the attraction. Even in marriage, that's the case. I always tell couples, it's the strangest thing that we actually believe that marriage today is about total, almost exhibitionism. You're supposed to walk around naked in front of each other. You're supposed to shower and take care of your hygienic needs in front of each other. Where did this kind of stupidity ever come? That even marriage has no sense of mystery, no sense of discovery, no sense of exploration. Marriage is not a destination. Marriage is a journey. These are crazy modern ideas that I don't even know where they originated from. That number one, going back to unavailability, that relationships should not about be unavailability. They're not total availability. You disclose everything about yourself and then immediately, no mystery, immediate physical connection. And social media has so undermined these principles in a way that is very damaging to relationships. It's a great way to make sure your friends know what you had for breakfast, and it may get you more likes. Because remember, there's a shock value, there's an exhibitionist value to social media. And by the way, I love social media. And I'm doing social media right now, but I still believe that there could be a mysteriousness, an element to social media. Look, we once all believed that there were people whom you could never have enough of. We thought that Donald Trump, for example, would dominate the airwaves. Whatever you think of Trump, whether you are a big Trumpist and you think he's the American Messiah, or whether you think Trump is the destruction of American democracy, the one thing we all thought is that the media would never tire of him, ever. And now, Trump is going through a very mysterious phase, largely because he's been deplatformed, and his popularity is only growing. It's the strangest thing. Again, I'm not looking at the political class, I'm looking at the interest aspect. It's not true that the world only wants to know everything about you, it's never going to get tired of you. And it's not true that they're not going to want to know a lot more about you when you go into a more mysterious phase. It's a fascinating thing. Let alone all the other celebrities. Which leads us to rule number 3. So what's rule number 1? Unavailability. Rule number 2? Mysteriousness. You know what number 3 is? So counterintuitive. So to do this, to answer this, I need your help. And then we'll take questions. Okay? So if you go to Dubai, I go to Miami Beach. Gorgeous beaches everywhere. Well, it's just so interesting about social media. You can do right here. I am in Dubai, and people are writing everywhere. Hi, everyone. So I grew up in Miami Beach, gorgeous beaches. Dubai also has some beautiful beaches. We've only seen a few of them so far. Let me ask you a simple question. So you go to a beach, and there are women wearing bikinis, bathing suits. That should be a very erotic environment. And yet, what do most men do on a beach? They either play frisbee or fall asleep. And yet the same guy can be walking home from a beach, and a woman may have left her blinds open to her apartment, and she's walking around saying the exact same amount of clothing as beach attire, only this time it's for undergarments, but not exposing any more flesh than undergarments, which is, Would the guy suddenly think, oh my gosh, I'm walking by this woman's apartment, she left her blinds open, and I'm seeing something, I can't believe this. Anyone have a frisbee? I need a Okay, so there's 1,000 women on the beach and the guy's falling asleep or reading a novel. There's one woman here and the guy suddenly, his interest his curiosity is aroused. Help me understand why. Why at the beach are the guys falling asleep but not if someone leaves their blinds open accidentally? Anyone?
It's back to availability again. The image is on the beach is available. The image of women in bikinis, but not when.
Okay, you're very close. I'm looking for a slightly different language, but you're close. Anyone? We spoke about unavailability.
It's a surprising event.
Yeah. Okay, Ross is illicit. Go ahead.
Not allowed, forbidden.
Thank you. No matter what a woman puts on at the beach, bikini, etc., it's for public. It's public attire. But when you see something you're not supposed to see, it is forbidden. The third rule of attraction is actually sinfulness, forbiddenness. The Talmud expresses it very powerfully. It says, "Mayim genuvim yumtaku," that stolen waters are sweet. We all love that which is forbidden, right? So, when the United States, it's hard to believe, but the United States went through 11 years of prohibition. You could not buy a bottle of wine in the United States until Franklin Delano Roosevelt became president in 1933. Do you know how much alcohol was consumed in the United States in those 11 years? Everything we talk about, the mafia, organized crime, it all started then. Bootlegging. And half the people want to now, I don't know, legalize cannabis thinking the same thing. I don't know. It's a big debate. The point is, who are the most written about women in the great novels of world literature? Is it the loyal, faithful wife? Of course not. It's the forbidden wife. It's the unfaithful wife. What are the most famous novels and the most famous literary characters of all time? Well, the novel considered to be the greatest novel of all time is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. And then you have Madame Bovary, and then you have Lady Chatterley, and then you have Tess, and I could go on. The only loyal, faithful wife that I know of in great world literature is Lady Macbeth. It's the forbidden wife. So how do you make something, if marriage is all about being so legal, how do you make it forbidden? And then you have this Jewish concept of husband and wife being sexually illicit, forbidden to each other. Or the fact that you can't just see each other's bodies at all times, or you can't just share a bed. Judaism actually believes that in the sinful marriage is, I actually want to write a book by that title, God willing. I think marriages, they're way too legal. There's a sinful dimension of marriage. How do you see a sinful dimension of marriage? Obviously, I believe in marriage fully, and obviously I believe that hurting each other through the terrible sin of infidelity, which God just decried in the Ten Commandments last week's Torah reading, it pulverizes relationships and destroys the psyche. To be cheated on or to cheat, and to have that kind of secret. It's a terrible sin. I'm not speaking about a religious sin. I'm talking about a sin that compromises our humanity. So what's the sinful marriage? Well, here's an example. You know, the average guy believes, the average husband, the joke, of course, is that the husband turns to his wife and says to her, "How about some sex tonight?" And the wife turns back and says, "Not tonight, I have a headache." And yet the man can have an axe lodged in his head, and he's still ready. Honey, you really want to do this? I don't know how to tell you this, honey, but you got an axe in your head. So what? I'm ready. The joke is, of course, that men are always sexual and women have headaches looking for excuses. There's no truth to that. In the Torah, women are much more sexual than men. It's Eve who is seen as the temptress in the Garden of Eden, not Adam. Or the Jewish myth of Lilith. Or the reason why even in certain cultures there were harems. The idea of the harem, we thought that the idea of the harem was that the guy is so sexual he needs 500 partners. Precisely the opposite was true. The female sexual nature was seen was so robust that if you belonged to the king or the prince, you had to be sequestered in the harem, because women were looking for sexual partners. The point is, where did we ever come up with this stupid idea that men are so much more sexual than women? Men are uniorgasmic, women are multi-orgasmic. I could go on. Judaism has always acknowledged. That's why at a Jewish wedding ceremony, no one even focuses on this. When we read the Kesubah aloud, which is written in Aramaic, This is read aloud, usually by the rabbi. You know what the Kosher is? It's a statement of obligation of the husband to the wife, and it says he has 3 obligations. Food, clothing, shelter, and sexual fulfillment. He has to satisfy his wife sexually. God Almighty. And we don't even, it's not that everyone comes up and starts translating this because we're going to shock the audience. But why do I say this? Because part of the sinful marriage is where a husband is in tune with his wife's sexuality, their sexual needs, sexual fantasy, sexual desires. All of modern porn caters so stupidly and so monolithically to the male libido. Porn is a joke. It's just so stupid and predictable or so my friends tell me.
Not that you would know.
I'm saying, so my friends say, well, Ross, when you were telling me the other day about it, I debated in a public debate. You can't make this up. Me and Larry Flint, who died about a year ago, he was always very nice to me. He was probably America's foremost pornographer up until at least our debate 20 years ago, the creator of Hustler magazine. But he was a really interesting guy. We met on a TV show on Fox News, and then I challenged him to a public debate. He agreed to the debate. It was moderated by Roseanne Barr.
Wow.
In fact, when he passed away, we published the full audio. I don't know if this video, but there's a full audio that we found on the internet. We published it. And I said to Larry Flynn, I said, you know what the biggest argument against porn is? He said, Rabbi, been there, done that, I know what you're going to say. It exploits women, degrading to women, ruins marriages. You know. I said, no. I said, Larry, for you, I'm only using a business argument. The biggest problem with porn is that it's so incredibly boring. It's such a total bore. He said, what are you talking about? You know how much money we make on porn? What do you mean? And now, of course, porn is like 70% of the internet. I said, I'll prove to you how boring it is. I said, you just said you're a smart businessman. How many women do you pay through a year to be your, whatever they're called in, not the playmate of the year, whatever they're called in Hustler, woman of the month, 12, right? It's January, February. I said, why don't you just take the pictures of one woman and reproduce them? January, February, March, don't pay 12, pay 1. He said, because no one's going to, once you see Miss January, you want Miss February, no one's going to buy it. I said, so it is boring. Once our bodies are overexposed, you need a new body in order to retain and sustain interest, or no one's going to buy the magazine, which is why for internet porn, if you click one link, 10,000 other pictures suddenly pop up, or that's what Ross told me last night as well. Because male sexuality is just so monolithic. It all comes down to so much the need for novelty. Novelty usually in the form of new flesh. But to finish, there's 2 kinds of sexual novelty. There's horizontal novelty, new bodies, new flesh. That's where people cheat, or a lot of husbands become porn addicts. I counsel a lot of those husbands. It's really an epidemic. It's getting pretty serious. Porn addiction is defined as looking at porn for an hour a day or more. I know people who are losing their jobs because they're even doing it at work. But then there's vertical, so there's horizontal renewal. Horizontal renewal is also when people are like addicted to travel. They get tired of like just being in one place. They always need to move. And travel's nice, and tourism's nice. It's important for the world economy. It's good to be enriched by other cultures. But there's something called vertical renewal. You could be in the same place. You can find endless new possibilities. When you have like a staycation, you discover all these things about your hometown that you never knew. You can discover so many new dimensions of your husband, of your wife, of your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your primary partner, by just staying and peeling away the layers and asking about them, about fantasy. And that's the sinful marriage, where you begin to open up about illicit fantasy, not acting on it, but discussing it, making your marriage so much more holistic. So there it is. Talk about kosher sex, talk about kosher lust. And before I go to any questions, I have to do our final test. You ready? What are the 3 secrets of erotic attraction? Number 1, unavailability. Number 2, mysteriousness. Number 3, sinfulness. What is it that a woman wants? Chosen. Who was the one that told me about all these links and these adult websites?
Can you take any questions?
Sure.
Would be the time stop. Questions for Shmuley?
Is there a statistic on Jewish marriage as opposed to non-Jewish marriage in terms of divorces? Show there are less divorces in Jewish marriage. And have you seen the difference, let's say, in American Jewish statistic, and then you travel the world, and there would be different statistic there? Because obviously there is correlation between like family, let's say, culture in America and family culture in Jewish America.
There are statistics. I don't know how reliable they are, but just from my own experience, do I think that the Jewish community is vastly different to mainstream society? No, because by and large, well, here's one of the reasons. By and large, the Jewish community is not. Most Jews today are traditional in some respects. 90% of Jews have a Passover Seder. 90% of Jewish boys are circumcised. Most American Jews are very supportive of Israel. But aside from that, Jews are living mainstream lives. They're watching the same, they're going to the same universities, they're watching the same TV shows, they're reading the same newspapers, they're engaged in the same media. So by and large, it's the same. A more appropriate question to get different data would be: is the Orthodox community very different? Because especially like the very Orthodox community, they're more sequestered. They're not watching the same TV shows or any TV shows. A lot of them don't even have smartphones. And what you see now is an assault by Hollywood, which is interesting, on the ultra-Orthodox community and trying to expose them as hypocrites. So you see on Netflix the series Unorthodox, which I thought was so stupid, and I was a major critic of it.
Why do you think it was stupid? Let
me get back to that just 1 second. And then right after that, they did My Unorthodox Life with Julia Hart, who married the guy that owns the Perla, and I had a big public spat with her because she gave an interview with the New York Times where she said that Judaism is not into sex, and she had to only when she left Orthodoxy. I'm not making this up. I'm just saying. I'm not even here to mock her about it, but I'm just saying what she said. She said that she started connecting, I think, with Cirque du Soleil, like acrobats, and doing all kinds of interesting stuff. Okay, and I wrote a column that was widely circulated, everywhere, that was called "The Orthodox Jews Have the Best Sex." Anyway, why did I like Unorthodox? Because it's not a true reflection of Orthodox Jewish life. Is it true that there are husbands who are abusive in the Orthodox? Of course. In the same way it would be true in any culture, in any ethnicity. Is it true that Judaism would ever condone that, or sees sex in marriage as something so mechanical and robotic? Totally the opposite. There is no religion on earth that, from its inception, had a healthier view of human sexuality, its fundamentally sacred nature, than Judaism. That's why when Kosher Sex was published, it made such a very big impact, in the non-Jewish world, but especially interesting in places like the evangelical community. I believe that Kosher Sex helped to spur the publication of many books in the evangelical community, the born-again community in the United States. So, because this was a subject that wasn't really talked about. Look, even in Judaism it wasn't but that's more of a modern development. If you study the Talmud, and the Talmud is broken into a 7-year cycle where we study a page a day and we finish all things every year. So I finished one cycle, and now I'm doing a second cycle. I have a partner that I study it with. The Talmud is so sexually explicit that you would find it mind-boggling. Sexual advice, it's incredible. You have to remember, the shame about sex doesn't even come from religion. It mostly comes from Aristotle. But Aristotle had a seminal impact on Catholicism, mostly through Thomas Aquinas. Aristotle believed in dualism. For Aristotle, the mind and the body were in conflict. So the mind was special and the spirit was special, but the body was lowly. Aristotle actually said that the fact that we get pleasure from our bodies shows our kinship with animals. So these Aristotelian ideas are where people started really having problems with sex, but they entered the mainstream of Christianity for sure. And I talk a lot about this because, St. Paul was celibate, but he didn't believe in lust. I always try to trace, where do we start demonizing lust? And it really starts, I think, in the epistles of St. Paul. Because St. Paul famously said, you should all be like me. You should be celibate. But if you burn with too much desire and passion, then it's better to marry than to burn in hell. Now think about that. Paul is saying, if you have too much sexual passion, you should get married in order to kill the passion off, which is what happens to a lot of people in marriage. Better to marry than to burn. Isn't that fascinating? That marriage is seen a way of tempering and transforming it from lust into love. But like I said, the Jewish marriage is a lust marriage, not just a love marriage. I'm not saying love is not important, don't get me wrong. Love is very important, but lust is much more powerful. That's why I said, you can love someone and still betray them because lust is more powerful than love. And by the way, if St. Paul was right, that lust is something bad, it's funny, a lot of people are writing here that they have a problem with unorthodox and that's clear. If I'm correct that lust is ungodly and sinful, then the 10th commandment, the summation of all the 10 commandments, thou shalt not lust after your neighbor's wife. God would have said, thou shalt not lust after any woman, because lust is bad for everybody. But clearly the implication is you should not covet your neighbor's wife, but you should be coveting your own wife.
One more question.
So you mentioned before, basically the married, like the basic of the, let's say the goal, one of the goals of the Judaism, one of the main things is the Jewish, the marriage institution. And I want to go for like, okay, I will say like that, sorry. The moment, like you said, the main thing in relationship, in marriage, it's not the love, but the lust and the prey. And when I go to the basic of Judaism, if I take the sentence of Ve'ahavta le'recha kamocha, it's basically love. So maybe love is more important than the marriage institution. And it's not necessarily like, and if there is no love, maybe you should just move on.
So, that is the most famous commandment in the Torah, according to Rabbi Akiva. You must love your fellow man as yourself. Isn't it Leviticus 19:23, if I'm not wrong? We're not speaking about a primary romantic partner. We're speaking about what you're supposed to feel to every human being. It would be inappropriate to feel passionately about every person. That's where terrible mistakes were made over the past few years, where society finally kind of woke up to this is unacceptable. We have to treat everybody with respect, love, connection, empathy. And the Abraham Accords are an example of that. There was always a common humanity between Arabs and Jews. We're God's children. In many ways, Judaism shares far more commonalities with Islam than Christianity, much more. If I go into a mosque, it feels like a synagogue, with the exception there usually aren't chairs. But in every other respect, there's no graphic depiction of God the way there would be in a church. Separation of the sexes. I could go on. Mosques, and the halal rules are very similar to kosher. The hadith is like the Torah Shabbal Peh. There's so many similarities. So what was this fight over? And I'm not saying that there weren't issues that aren't important and don't remain important. But you have to always find the commonalities. That's love. You have to transcend the divisions and find a common humanity, even amidst some serious differences. Listen, the United States and Mexico are neighbors. There's a lot of very serious differences. The United States would argue a lot of illicit narcotics coming from Mexico. A lot of gang violence from the cartels coming from Mexico. And no doubt Mexico has many arguments against the United States where they feel either, they have many complaints as well, geopolitical, but they don't hate each other, right? And the Abraham Accords is establishing this common humanity between Arabs and Jews, Muslims and Jews, and it's a beautiful thing, and I'm very inspired by it. And that's why it's such an honor to be here with all of you. And to be with my Arab brothers and sisters here in Dubai. But That's the Ahavta you must love your fellow man as yourself. That's not what a man is supposed to feel for his wife, It's supposed to be much more passionate than that. Much more passionate. There has to be chimud. There has to be this deep desire. There has to be this longing, this yearning, this chukah, like I said. And King Solomon sums it up best in Shir Hashirim. My book, Kosher Lust, we spoke about kosher sex, and I wrote a book, Kosher Lust, is really based on the Shir Hashirim. So the Song of Solomon, there's 24 books of the Hebrew Bible. And the Talmud says that the holiest of them all is the Song of Solomon, Shir Hashirim Asher Shlomo. Christians call it Song, and we call it Song of Solomon. And it's really a beautiful erotic lust poem about a man and a woman who have all three of these things. They never meet, mysteriousness, unavailability. It's a sinful relationship. It never says they're husband and wife even. It's amazing the Talmud would say that this is the holiest of all. And in the Sephardic communities around the world, they read the Shir Hashirim every single Friday night, every single Shabbat before the prayers on Friday night. Ashkenazi communities usually don't, but in Israel, New York, everywhere. When I was in Geneva and I used to attend the Sephardic shul there, they say the whole Shir Hashirim. Most Sephardic Jews know it by heart because they say it every Friday night. It's a lust poem, but King Solomon speaks about a more watery love, more steady, calm, kind of appropriate between, say, a brother and a sister, or a male-female acquaintance. A brother-sister even stronger, more intense, of course, but then there's something that's much more passionate, it's much more fiery, and that's what's supposed to exist in a fiery relationship. And it's kind of sad today that so many, again, I don't just speak to religious audiences, I'm not just speaking about marriage. Any primary monogamous relationship, even if you're not married, but you respect each other as being in a primary relationship, it would be very sad if they only felt a kind of more predictable, watery friendship kind of love and it wasn't passionate. 1 out of 3 American marriages is entirely platonic, they're non-sexual. 1 out of 3. The platonic marriage is becoming common throughout the Western world. That's very, very sad. And I've counseled many couples where a woman will sit there, her mascara running down her cheeks as she cries to explain to me what it's like to be in a bed with a man who's your husband, never touches you. Or a husband will tell you the same thing, what it's like to be in bed with your wife who never touches you. It's a very painful thing. We need tactility, we need touch, we need the validation of love making, and it's critical. You know, the Talmud says that a marriage that doesn't have sex at least once every 30 days, which is way too infrequent even in a healthy marriage, but that's considered a functional termination of the marriage. It's grounds for divorce.
Woman divorcing.
Either one. A woman, yes, if a woman can sue her husband for divorce, correct. Because platonic marriages are, we don't get married to be best friends. It's much more than that. It's much deeper than that. But just to conclude, we talked tonight about all these things that pertain mostly to intimate relations. But like I said, I actually believe that we can extrapolate from the microcosm of our own personal lives to the macrocosm of the life of nations. I think when we're happier in our marriages, happier with ourselves, strong mental health, strong sense of purposefulness and satisfaction in our lives, I think that's when we create healthy societies, healthy nations, and a healthy world. Societies where people are miserable, as we can see economically, etc., where people are very hard-pressed economically. War is usually a lot more common. There's a deep sense of unrest. I'm not saying that wealth can always lead to peace, because clearly it doesn't. I'm not the first to point out that people like Osama bin Laden were extremely wealthy and they had these terrible gripes against the West and became deadly. But by and large, when we see the kind of sound governance that I've witnessed here in Dubai, the kind of prosperity, thank God, it's unbelievable. And you do see that the caliber of people's lives being maximized, being elevated, and there's a dignity to that life. So there's always a connection between the microcosm and the macrocosm. And conversely, the same is true. You can have wealthy societies that have big, beautiful, gorgeous buildings, but you want to make sure that even in those societies there are healthy families, children being raised in stable environments. Marriage is a very strong institution. Seeing couples walk down the streets holding hands and seeing a lot of love and romance, these are all important things. And even if they are societies, whether in the ultra-Orthodox community, you're not going to see even husbands and wives who love each other holding hands, because public displays of affection are, not as common. And maybe in Islamic societies, same may be true. Same thing would be true if you went to certain parts of very religious Christian societies. That doesn't mean they don't love each other. Just walking along side by side, it doesn't have to be necessarily an overt display of romance, to just see that there's very stable, very strong relationships there. So remember, unavailability, mystery, sinfulness. I've been a rabbi now, I just turned 55, thank God. I became a rabbi when I was 21. But I've been a rabbi almost 34 years. And coming here to, and I've, God has been kind to me, and I've traveled and spoken in Jewish communities and non-Jewish communities all around the world. I once spoke to 100,000 people, believe it or not, in Seoul, South Korea. My wife Debbie, they told me you're going to speak to 100,000 people in the Olympic Stadium, and I said, yeah, it's like typical. I said, these are Korean Christians, very nice people, but typical Jewish exaggeration. There'll be 10 people in the stadium. But sure enough, anyway, I've had the privilege of speaking to larger audiences, smaller audiences, Jewish audiences, non-Jewish audiences, Muslim audiences, Christian audiences. But honestly, amidst all of that, coming to Dubai and seeing the things that I've seen over the past few days, and just seeing the miracle of brotherhood, and there's a messianic element to this, of the kind of world that God promised, that I hope that we can build on. The kind of world that Isaiah foretold in chapter 11 of Isaiah, where he speaks about swords, where he speaks about wolf lying with the lamb, and swords being beaten to plowshares, and the knowledge of God filling the earth the way the waters cover the ocean floor. So seeds have been planted here, and long may they continue. And I really want to thank Ross. The friendships that I forged in Oxford when I was a rabbi to the students, because what was interesting for me being rabbi to the students at the time was I was really the same age as the students. The Rabbi had sent me to Oxford. I had just turned 22. Debbie had just turned 20. Our first child wasn't even born yet. She was born 3 months into our stay at Oxford. Our daughter, Mushki, now has 5 children, thank God. Shana was the last of our children to be born in Oxford, and then Baba was born in London, remember? You were born in Oxford. So I was almost the same age as the students, which meant I could be their rabbi and their friend, and those friendships have lasted me my entire life. So to reconnect with Ross here in Dubai, to see what you're doing, to see the efforts that you make. But more than anything else, you know, Ross, words that emanate from love penetrate the heart. I feel that you represent the community with humility. I feel that you represent the community with integrity. I think that you are therefore, you're a Kiddush Hashem. You're representing you're an ambassador of our community with the integrity and with the values of our community, which is why I would guess, if I had to venture a guess, that you're highly respected by the government here, the person who helps open the minyan and everything. So thank you for everything that you do, and God should reward you. And if I may say one more, sorry, because my brother's not well, and he's much on my mind, and I love my brother very much, I'm going to say one last prayer in Hebrew. I'm sorry, but he's just on my mind, because 7,000 miles away, and he's in Miami, he's on my mind. So his name is Chaim Moshe, my mother's name is Esther Elka. Let's everybody pray for someone in Judaism. Chaim Moshe, I'm going to do one last Shalom Allah, the song of ascent. We look up to the heavens from where our salvation comes. This is by King David. My salvation comes from God, the creator of heaven and earth. He'll never allow you to stumble. Behold, he will not slumber, he will not tarry. The Garden of Israel. Neither the sun nor the moon will harm you the day or the night. God will hold you from all harm. He will protect your soul. God will allow you to exit in peace and return in peace. So I hope when God willing I get back to the United States, my brother will be restored to full health. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.